keeping daily records of calibration for balances and HPTLC system. Review on literature for complex problems of research such as proper identity of herbs, etc. Solving problem related to production and quality control requirements. Proper documentation related to ADMA. Troubleshooting in a lab related to equipments. Coordinating external studies also conducted by him. Prior to his current job, he had worked in a company as a research scholar on application, instrumentation, and techno-commercial field. Previous to this, he had worked in a therapeutic drug monitoring lab concerned with the phase 4th clinical trials on humans. Here, method development and validation on HPLC system was done by him. The analysis related to mass spectroscopy was also done by him. During his MSc in herbal sciences, he did attended a training on entrepreneurship in a herbal industry by Mitcon. In second year of BSc Biotechnology, he has undergone summer training in a clinical microbiology at Sir JJ Hospital. This makes his knowledge in a wide field with overall exposure to techno-commercial aspects of science and in the field of herbal. So, Dr. Chardesar has found a best person to talk about the HPTLC and its application to investigate unknown compounds. So I request Principal Burade sir of Government College of Pharmacy, Karad, to welcome him by offering a bouquet in the digital form. Mallick sir, please accept this bouquet, and
Welcome,
I
sir.
request you to
Yeah.
please enlighten our participants on the HPTLC and its application. Please, sir.
So, hi everybody. Thank you so much for this warm welcome. And I'm thankful to sir for inviting me for this guest lecture. You know, whenever there is a match going on, cricket match, always there is a series of people who are involved in it. And here I would first of all from my Ancrom team, on behalf of this entire Ancrom team, I am sincerely thankful and privileged and honored to start this opening session for the wonderful topic of application of spectroscopy and chromatography in structure eludation. We have lot many things, and I will try to show you today with the not a typical presentation and talk about it. We'll touch upon all things mixed, and that will give you an overall insight of the entire understanding. So my regards to Principal Sir, Borde Sir, and thank you Kuldeep Sir for introducing me such a wonderfully, and Dr. Abhay Wagh, and special thanks to Charde Sir, who has been constantly in touch with us and taken the pains of communicating with us and setting things up. So on behalf of entire Ancrom team and our principal SCAMAG, I welcome all the delegates for today. And with this note, I will start my presentation and hope you get a lot of clarity and knowledge from this presentation. I think so there is a different question answer box, or you can unmute and then we can have the question answer session at the end of the presentation. So let me start with my presentation. Now, for those who I have seen that there's a mixed crowd over here from students to highly professionals, industry people, and all research people are there. Your professors are there, and what I see over here is that is why we'll start with a small introduction to the concept, and I request the host to give me the permission to share my screen, because I think that permission is not given to me and I'm unable to share my screen. Just a minute.
Yes. Yes, sir. Now you are co-host.
So I am streaming live for my lab. So there is some background noise going on. So if you're unable to hear me, just let me know. Sorry for the trouble, because as you know, we are live from the lab. So that's it. Yeah, yes, I have got the option of sharing screen, and now I am sharing my screen. Okay. So first of all, on behalf of I have Naidu sir along me, who wants to say a special hi to all the candidates, and Cherde sir. Yeah.
Yes.
Good afternoon,
Hello, sir.
Chelde sir, especially.
Hello, sir. Hello. How are you?
Good afternoon, everyone, and
Yeah, nice
welcome
to
to
see you.
this seminar from Anchrome. I think today morning, Chelde sir also just reminded me about this seminar. I said we are very much there. You need difficulties. I mean, clarification you need. We will be able to solve it in the.
तुला काय झालंय
Uh,
बंद पडाले मध्ये
can you hear me?
Yes, yes, sir. You are very much.
Yeah. Okay. So once again, I welcome you all for this seminar, and Dr. Saikat is here, who will be able to. I mean, he's an expert on the HPTLC and especially on the applications which you are looking for. So thank you very much. Without wasting much of my time, I will just hand over to Dr. Saikat.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
So we had a certain guest appearance. So we'll move on with the regular presentations. Thank you, sir. And I'll share my screen. Okay, so first of all, this is not a typical presentation. I hope you can see my screen. And this is recently shared a paper which is freely available on CAMAC's website. But what it talks about is the very basics of this technique. So we'll quickly go through that and then move on to the instrumentation part. After that, we'll move on how we actually look forward when we are working with unknown molecules and we are interested to see some structure related findings and things like that. So we'll also go into that, and then we'll see small videos of understanding how particular processes of HPTLCs are done. HPTLC are done so that we get a thorough clarity on it. So very first screen, what you see on your screen, what you will be seeing is a concept introduction of planar chromatography. It has got many advantages, and that is why it is one of the very basic chromatographic techniques which can be used at a very basic level and start with very complex samples. You can analyze very simple samples and highly complex samples absolutely without any problem. So here you have that brief introduction which talks about it. The points which I want to highlight are about the greater flexibility of choices for stationary and mobile phases. As you know, the instrumentation also which has been designed is open to any kind of mobile phase and stationary phase which you want to use pertaining to your compound which you are interested in. For example, if I am interested in any flavonoid compounds, I can quickly take up the same TLC plate and I can combine with a mobile phase that is eluting my flavonoid compounds onto my plate. If I'm interested in some polar compound, non-polar compound like fats, oils, and I want to screen them, of course, that is possible. Take quickly and reverse phase plate and you analyze on them. So that gives and makes it a very benchtop, fast, rapid technique which has been analyzed over here. Parallel analysis and visual comparison is some of the USPs of this technique, because when you do a particular separation, if there is detector is not functioning well, you are absolutely blinded for the results. But when you have a instrument that is a detector which is you are the detector at first basis, you can directly take a call whether I should proceed with this experiment or halt my experiment, so as to I save my time, I get an observation and I take a call. So that is what it is, an ultimate tool that gives you visual understanding of how separation happens and understand how what you want to achieve, whether you have achieved or not, which we'll be seeing when we go in some applications and we see the output which is coming out of the separation. So the output is easily understandable. And parallel analysis is something which is very unique, because at a time you are screening 23 samples, 15 samples, and you get an understanding from that. So that gives you a very important aspect in today's world. As the complexities have increased. You get a lot more samples. Production is in a larger quantity because the demand is more, and then you require methods which can screen multiple samples in a unit short time. We cannot run instruments for days and nights all together to get the output. We need instruments that are faster, rapid, and gives me the result in 1 day or 2 day. With say 100 samples I want to analyze, with HPTLC in a day you can finish it off without any problem. So that is the parallel analysis capability of HPTLC, which are some of the USPs of this planar chromatography itself, which is directly transferred, and that advantage is taken up by HPTLC system. Single use of stationary phase reduces the need of sample cleanup. Now, this is also something very important. Now, as we go for structural elucidation, we are normally bewildered in the first step, is that how do we purify the sample? How do we get what we want? If we're interested, we are getting a lot of matrix effect, whether I'm going to isolate it from an oil fraction or some bacterial fraction I'm isolating, from herbal fraction I'm isolating. So many things are there into my mind, and then I need to have a separate strategy altogether for the sample cleanup itself. I have to invest, like one of the companies have a special ingredient which can take out the chlorophyll. So you have an additional cost which goes into your analysis time for using that expertise to handle that, how much quantity is required for how much quantity and things like that. So this is an in itself is a big challenge, and that is why HPTLC simplifies this, because you have minimal sample cleanup. Whatever you apply onto the plate, if you have a dedicated mobile phase, it will only elute those fractions. Other fractions are absolutely sitting at the bottom, and you can take a call whether you want to further investigate it with the same sample, or you with a different mobile phase, or you stop with your original investigation. So single use of stationary phase gives you that advantage. You don't have to reuse that anytime, so you can load higher quantities. That also is an advantage. These are some of the advantages which actually is passed on from this nature of planar chromatography to the HPTLC. Possible of multiple detections without need to repeat chromatography. That is also something unique. Now, for example, we do many investigations under light 254, 366. We see some UV bands. We see some, just excuse me. Can I have the sonicator off, please? Yeah. So when we talk about single use of stationary phase, which reduces need of sample clinical cleanup. Yeah, I covered that. Possibility of multiple detections without need to repeat the chromatography. Now, as you know that under 254, 366, I take the observation, and if I am interested to see some alkaloid, I can use that same plate, just dip it with a simple drag and drop reagent, and yes, I can get in this instant understanding whether I'm seeing an alkaloid or whether I'm seeing something else. So this is a total pass on from the planar chromatographic advantages which are there to HPTLC system, giving you a lot more advantages, highly diverse type of applications, and giving you flexibility to do any kind of research on HPTLC without any problem. Convenient chemical derivatization of separated substances and detection of biological activity as well. So that flexibility is also there. If somebody wants to go some advancement, that yes, I have done today an HPTLC system, but I just got an information, I got few peaks, and now I want to know whether I have an antioxidant property. Can I go club it because this drug is mentioned in Rasayana, and surely it must be having some antioxidant activity or some potent immunomodulatory activity, and the first step is it should have some antioxidant activity. So for screening that, either I'll have to do some burette type of gravimetric analysis, which will take me to do some sample cleanup so that other components don't interfere and I get the accurate result. But with HPTLC, you are specific. You directly separate the components onto the plate and simply take that plate, dip it in a DPPH reagent, and it will tell you, see, this fraction is having that potency of antimicrobial. Out of the 5, you can choose those and further go for characterization of those molecules at your level. So all those things are togetherly clubbed in, coming directly from the nature of planar chromatography, and giving you advantage in HPTLC, low cost and rapidity. Now, when we see a typical thin layer chromatographic development system, it is something like this. You have a mobile phase, you have a stationary phase. Now, here you will see an example where you have few spots which have been applied as a band. They have been separated onto the stationary phase, that is the plate, and the phenomenon which has resulted in this separation is due to the mobile phase, which is separating these components onto the plate. Now, how this happens is this happens with the composite contribution of each and every factor of the three. The mobile phase is contributing, the gas phase which is resultant from the mobile phase evaporation, and the stationary phase itself, which is on which you have applied the sample. So the first aspect, the stationary phase, that is the plate, the thin layer plate which you get, on which you do the separation. And here you have a wide range of options which are available. The very basic one is the silica gel, which is mostly suitable for many kinds of sample. You don't need to go for a different grade of sample, but we have seen that 99% of samples are easily done on HPTL on the silica samples, and the silica particle size, based on that, two classifications of this stationary phase has been done: the TLC grade plates and the HPTLC grade plates. Now there is some information which they have given, because why it is having that porous nature is because of this 6 nanometers in structure which it has. And then you have this detailed understanding of how the stationary phase is reacting to different components, whether it is a polar component, mid-polar component, and non-polar component. You have different additions done to the silica to modify the surface, and you have the separation done of respective components onto the plate. And then you have so many options in it. Here again they have compiled in, and they have also mentioned on what kind polarity. Now in terms of chemistry, and when you go for elution part, structure elucidation, it is very important to know the nature of the compound, whether it is I'm isolating from an oil fraction, whether I'm isolating from a methanolic fraction, whether I'm using an ethanol hydroalcoholic ethanolic mixture to isolate my compound. That tells you, defines you the polarity of the nature. And once you know this, you can easily use a suitable reverse your plate stationary phase and separate that compound further. So it's a lot more diverse, and you get many options into it. After that, there are different labels which are giving. Now the here also they have given you that the phenomenon of separation onto the stationary phase is through adsorption phenomenon, and here they have explained you how a particular compound will behave onto a plate if you are using silica as your sorbent. Now here you have acids which normally have a lower RF value, then alcohols will be mid-ranges, carbonyls will go further, esters will go even further, ethers will go more further, and finally hydrocarbons, which are like non-polar in nature, will be totally at the end. Similarly, if you use a RP plate, how will a heavy molecule function on that? You have C20 carbon chain compounds which are having C20 range, will be C20 to C15 will be normally in between this range, C15 to C10 normally over here, and C10 lesser than C10, and around C10 you will see the separation happening onto the plate. Now what it happens is it is isolated onto the plate surface. There is no time factor over here. What you get separation is onto the plate at different locations, and that is how you interpret the results. There are many understanding of plate quality also, and that is very important when you are handling a particular sample and you wish to get them separated. There are different codings on the stationary phase, like fluorescent indicators, which stands for F254, that there is a wavelength exciter onto the stationary phase, that when it is onto the stationary phase it excites, and that is why you get that greenish fluorescence onto the plate. Preparative plates are also available, which is another type of work you can do on HPTLC, and that for them you have a specialized type of plate known identified with codings of PSC and PF. RP plates are there, water resistant plates are there, in which if you want to use higher amount of waters in your mobile phase, you can do that with these grade of plates which are available. S acid stable 60 is the average Armstrong units. Then automated multiple development AMD, and so these are some of the terminologies which are associated with the plate, so or the stationary phase which you use. Then we come to the mobile phase, which is another element of this separation, and here you again have a selectivity, you have criteria of selection of these solvents in different categories. Now, how is this category devised in? It is based on the similar type of properties which they exhibit, like you say volatility, you say the elution strength, that once you use this, whether it will elute or keep the molecule at the place. So with this, based on such kind of different properties, the Snyder series is there, where they have identified this solvents and categorized it to particular category. So when you are using a mobile phase, you can use a combination of something which is highly eluent, for example ethyl acetate, which will elute the sample, and something which will make the sample stay, like toluene. In case my sample is in methanol, I can use a toluene ethyl acetate combination to separate the components, because ethyl acetate on one part will elute the sample and toluene on the other part will be retaining the sample. So there is a mixture combination of that, and which results in separation of multiple components based on the polarity function. So that is the essence of the mobile phase. Here again, an example has been shown, that if you are using a combination of n-hexane and ethyl acetate, a particular test dye which has been applied, a dye sample, how will it separate onto the plate? And if as you change the composition, the separation quality also changes. Now in this, the important part is the separation quality. If you see, excuse me, 95% is your hexane and 5% is ethyl acetate. If you see over here, gives you a separation of compounds with good no diffusion. This is an important criteria. You should have bands which are compact, lesser diffused. Other mobile phases, even this 90 and 10 is good, but if you see, the bands have respectively got quite a broadening effect. So we avoid that, and an ideal mobile phase will be which will be eluting all the substances. Just a second.
Saikat, sir. Participants, please wait. I will call you.
Sorry about that. So when we talk about the separation, what we expect is lesser diffused and well resolved bands, so we can go ahead and get a good separation. So that is why we'll term either this 95 or 90. These two mobile phases will be ideal. But if you see, for the last component, that is the purple one, all these, especially 85% and 15%, is also a good combination over here, because it is eluting the purple part also. So even though 95 the bands are compact, if my requirement is also the purple band, I will have to switch over to this mobile phase, which is something very ideal. So this is how the separation happens, and combinations are being used to get the idealistic separation. Here you have the categorization of solvents, as I told you how they are categorized. And then finally, we move on into the gas phase. Extremely sorry. So coming back to the gas phase, you have these many conditions that are there: the saturation, the preconditioning, evaporation, and formation of secondary funds. In saturation, what happens is you have this filter paper which they have labeled. What happens is the mobile phase is being taken up by the filter paper because it is wet, and the fumes from that filter paper are saturating the chamber. This phenomenon is known as saturation. When the fumes of the or gases which are forming from the mobile phase are occupying the chamber and saturating it, this process is known as saturation. Then you have something known as preconditioning, where what happens is you don't have the mobile phase over here, but what you have put is your mobile phase on the left hand side with the filter paper, and on the right hand side you have the plate which is actually exposed to this gases which are formed from the mobile phase and coating the surface of the plate to have a coating onto the plate of that stationary phase, which will again result in separation of compounds. And then finally, you have the evaporation phase, where you have from the plate itself, you are having components that are evaporating. And many a times the solvent compounds are getting separated. I'm not talking about the analyte, but I'm telling the solvent compounds due to this evaporation get separated. And that is why you start getting this secondary front.
Hello, Saikat sir, you are not audible. Hello.
I think it's a problem of the connection, sir.
Yes, connectivity. I will call him. Probably he might get rejoin. No?
Wait, dear participant, because of some network issue, he has left the meeting. Within few minutes, he will rejoin to our session.
Yeah, he will join within next few minutes, right? He is facing some internet issue at his end. So please wait.
Sir, make him co-host.
Yes, I have already made.
Yeah, getting back to the sorry about that error. Coming back, so this is the formation of the secondary front. That is why we were talking about the secondary front and how it happens. So these are some of the phenomena which are associated when the development happens. So it is very important that all the conditions are proper when you perform this experiment. Now in HPTLC, we have the retardation factor, which is governed by migration distances. And here you have an example how this is calculated as it is stationary. And then finally, when we talk about HPTLC and compare it with TLC, TLC is it's subjective. It can change from person to person. But when I talk about HPTLC, it's a glass plate, fixed dimension, normally expected, simple to, or you can also use an aluminum plate. Simple to sophisticated instruments are there to help you get the same quality result and perfect quality separation. Software and everything is properly documented, and not only that, you also have the system suitability test, which is also done to see to it that the chromatography is performed perfectly. So this is an example of the same peak being scanned on HPTLC plate and TLC plate. Definitely you will see a broader TLC, broader peak when you go for the TLC grade of plates and you analyze samples on that as compared to HPTLC. But if you have a very complex matrix, you can definitely see that. So data is validated, traceable digital data. So these are some of the important aspects when we talk about and understand the basics of TLC and HPTLC. This is a direct comparison between TLC and HPTLC. So now, as we have gone through this, we will now quickly switch over to the presentation. And first of all, we'll see how we use the equipment for different requirements. So this is a laboratory where you can access our laboratory and avail the facility of a free training. We have a team and a big team of 14 analysts who are dedicated to all the HPTLC work around the country. And we have some online platforms where you can get the details. Now, when we come back to the HPTLC, generally we have first the aim where we want to separate. And when we talk about to the concept of structural elucidation, the aim is very important, whether you want to finally validate your method, you are interested in just to identify, or whether you are interested to just see whether it is quantify, whether it is present or not. So there are different aspects of doing an experiment, and that clearly defines your first aim. Like you want to separate the compounds and analyze that. You have is this mixture, and then finally whether you want to go to the further extent of identifying with comparative or directly absolute. Where comparative is generally when you have a standard, you are referring to that, and absolute is where you are not knowing anything, you are investigating an unknown molecule. So these are things are available. Now this is the comparison of how a typical TLC versus HPTLC looks. And again, you have the high resolution, which is very important because when you go to the later stages of quantification, identification, the importance is of the resolution. So here you have the ginseng sample, which has been analyzed, and typically this is a Japanese pharmacopoeial methodology of Asian ginseng, where you see the separation, but it is not that clear. Of course, HPTLC scores over here, giving you a much better separation. Miniaturization of the plate is there. This directly leads in lesser solvent consumption, low cost, and more samples. I already discussed this in when we were understanding the basics, how it is helping us. And this is the same thing which has been shown over here. Then we move into some comparison. So again, which we also covered, I'll not go into details. I have very a more number of slides, but we'll only consider those which are important for this concept and correlating to this view of today for understanding the separation. So then you have how does HPTLC have to be done? If I'm interested to do a elucidation later on, I want to identify the structure. So how do I start with? You typically have a sample preparation, which is very simple. You take a sample, you weigh it, and then you add either methanol or hydro alcohol based extraction solvent. You sonicate it, centrifuge it, and that's it. You are ready with the sample and you are ready to do the application with that. Then there should be no particles, and that is why the centrifugation is being used. So you prevent the requirement of any filtration and things like that, and directly take up the sample and go for the sample application over here. The sample application happens through either manually or instrumentation. Mostly the instrumentation is preferred because of the faster nature of application, more number samples of applied, and uniform distribution of the molecule onto the stationary phase for getting the separation quality at the best. And then you have the development step where you develop the chromatogram and those 3-4 phenomena which I showed you: saturation, equilibrium, those come into the picture. So you give those saturation if required. 20-minute saturation is compulsory for mostly all types of analysis. And then you develop your solvent, you develop your analyte onto the stationary phase with the developing solvent and get this process of development done. Finally, after that, you go for the visualization where you observe the plate, and here you have an instrumentation with photo documentation system where you separate and you record the investigation, how the separation has happened. Because generally, otherwise, what we typically say are it had come in the upper part of the plate and lower part of the plate, but no, this is a solid document proof which you get, which is a photo documentation which states that after doing the particular analysis, you got this particular kind of separation, and here is your compound onto the plate. And after that, you have the scanning process, which is where the chromatograms are generated. So not only does it end at just visualizing it, you can scan it, and we have some exclusive features to our scanner which can give you some preliminary idea like spectrum function, where you can find out a spectrum of a compound, and that spectrum pattern is used to compare it between the sample and say whether it is the same component or there is something else which has co-eluted at that particular spot. Of course, you can use the derivatization to cross verify this, but at preliminary level, you can scan the data and generate the chromatogram, and once you are sure that it is the same substance, you can then quantify. So then you can do the further, if you want to isolate it, calculate it, that yes, this is in 10% absolute approx concentration, and if I want to elute it, I can get around say practically 6% or 7% yield from the total quantity which I take. So that is a kind of work which you can establish using the scanner, where quantification happens and then verification happens because of the spectra. And then finally, you have the photo documentation, which takes place actually after derivatization. So till scanning, it is a non-destructive technique. At this part of time, your molecule does not get any kind of a changes due to any chemical reaction or things like that. It is the simple separation which is happening onto the plate, separation of compounds which are happening, and these molecules are intact onto the plate. So if you wish to investigate further, you can use a derivatizing reagent to derivatize that molecule, and then you get a color confirmation, understanding that what kind of a compound it is, and then you again document the image, and you can also do a scanning. And this is a standard practice of HPTLC, but there are different possibilities, because after scanning, you can either go for derivatization, or once you have established it is the same component, you can derivatize the half plate, and the half plate you can keep as it is, take the spot, elute it with a TLC-MS interface, and get it analyzed maybe with a MS or some other IR, NMR things you can do by collecting it in the vial. So that possibility is also there. And then this is the derivatization can be clubbed, or it can be substituted by doing a biological activity analysis. Like that same plate, instead of a derivatizing reagent, I can use a microbial culture. I can dip the plate and keep it for incubation, and then the zone of inhibitions and comment on whether it will have a antimicrobial effect. I can dip that same plate in DPPH reagent and allow it to incubate for around 30 seconds, and then infer the results whether it is having the antioxidant activity. So these are possibilities. After the non-destructive technique, you have many amount of possibilities, and you can really investigate when you are going for drug discovery and analyzing so many samples rapidly onto the plate. These are again some of the advantages. I'll not go into this. We have already covered those into the basic understanding. Again, now MS, which is there, investigation, which is there, it is independent of the mobile phase. For example, many of people ask that do I have to use a MS grade solvent for separation onto HPTLC? The answer is no. When you go for the isolation or isolating that spot, at that time you require the MS solvent. So your initial investigation, you are running with an AR/GR grade of solvent, which is easily affordable and quite economically used in HPTLC. And then finally, when you do the final characterization, at that time you can use a high grade of solvents to elude the spot. So again, MS independent mobile phases you can use for your HPTLC, and then club it with TLC-MS to find out the mass. Effect directed analysis, I gave you some examples like dipping the same plate. And right hand side, what you see is a typical separation of compounds over here. You can see over here that how the separation looks in HPTLC, and you get very characteristic separation, very high resolution, and part to part separation. So that is how you can use this advantages. And this is just 366 visibility. There is also 254 under 254 light. That is a shorter UV under which you observe the plate and get an inference. Then you derivatize the plate, you get another data from that. And finally, you do the MS, you get another data and antimicrobial. So how many data points we are adding at a time when you want to infer something? So the more number of data points, the more accurate, the more better the data quality is. So that is the advantages over here. With a single technique, you can do multiple possibilities. Again, these are some of the advantages, and will not go through this again. Official guidelines, when you're using a technique, definitely it should have some official guidelines also included. And HPTLC is under USP and also under EP. In IP, it is being added. Then in CP, Chinese pharmacopoeia, it is there. WHO guidelines, it is there. Many other places it is being used because of its very large advantages, which is high, which it has. Being a chromatographic technique inspired from planar chromatography, this has a lot more advantages. So these are some of the chapters which will tell you that how to use HPTLC. Like if you go for the general chapter 202, it will tell you how fats and oil scan samples can be analyzed. If you are going into general chapters of 203, 1064, they are for botanicals. If you wish to use for any other purpose, you have the general chapter of 621 from USP, which tells you you can use it for any analytical, quantify and quantitative and qualitative work there similarly. So these are some of the chapters which talk about HPTLC. They define standardization and uniformity. That is the key aspect to this technique. If you are standardizing a particular method with standard conditions, you are bound to get the reproducible results. So then there are some insights of hardware requirement which are there. So these are jotted over here, and exactly HPTLC system complies with this: application volume, band length, position, chromatographic chambers, controlling the activity of stationary phase. That is also possible in today's age. We have a humidity control device which is inbuilt into the ADC2, and you can control the moisture around the room with this humidity control device. And this highly eliminates the possibility of getting variation in your chromatogram separation, and each and every time you will get the same quality of separation that is happening. Reproducible drying of developing plates, heating plate after derivatization, that is also an important aspect. Very simplistic in understanding that derivatization, heating a plate is a normal phenomenon, but it has to be done with a proper way. You take the plate, you place it on a plate heater so that uniform heating is being established across the plate surface for the reaction to interact with the molecule and then get derivatized and give you understanding. So heating of the plate is very much important. The time, many people say that they get slight variations when they are getting this derivatization process. The time factor is very important because it is a chemical. When you are accelerating the reaction with the process of heating, if there is more heating, ultimately the molecule gets charred and it will turn black in color. But initially, if you subject it to the specific time, like with ASR, we have specially observed after 3 minutes, you prolong the heating, of course, it will turn the band color into a different color, and that will result in variation of the detection response that is there when you scan this plate. So heating derivatization, although it's a very simple process, but it is an important aspect, and that is being also covered in HPTLC, the standardized way of how it has to be done. Derivatizing reagent preparations are important. You should not get precipitates. Color changes, you should observe. If the derivatizing reagent is being the color is changing, you need to replace them with a fresh reagent and use it. So these are important aspects, and that is why in USP standardization they have talked about this. They have clearly mentioned how the process has to be done. IQ, OQ, PQ, an important aspect of any instrumentation, is covered in HPTLC. So you are rest assured that the instrument is performing to the suitable cause and without any problems. And system suitability, which is very important in today's date, to see whether there is chromatographic variation or whether there is some manual error which is happening, that can be pinpointed with the help of system suitability test, and that also has been developed in HPTLC. There is a UHM known as the universal mixture that is there, HPTLC mixture, which is there. That is a mixture of 8 components which is used, which is suitable for any particular type of polarity of mobile phases which you are using, and you can simply use them. Take your 2 compounds which are coming out of that as your SST, 2 or 3 compounds, use them for your SST, and see to it that all the analysis is done at perfect way. So that is also present in USP. So this is a basic understanding of how these parameters are important and how do they change when you are doing the simple process of HPTLC analysis. The plate layout is very important with the proper identity of the plate so that you do not make any confusion. And for proper documentation record, it is mandatory. Then you have the spot versus band effect, how the spots performs as compared to the band. We always prefer and go for the band type of application, which is much more advantageous, because when it separates uniformly. You don't see any diffusion, or minimum amount of diffusion is being seen when these bands are separated. Followed by that, the band length is very important. Smaller band will give rise to a spot effect, whereas a optimum band length of 6 to 8 mm gives you a very good separation quality, and you can really resolve your compounds with that kind of band length. In certain cases, if your compound is very low, but you are seeing that there is a higher matrix effect, you can also apply band lengths of 1 centimeter and develop those plates to see the minus of the compounds that are present. Higher quantity you can load, and that is how we go in for the band length. But the USP suggests only 8 mm band length, which is suitable for all the application. Distance to solvent has been studied, and from that 8 mm solvent from the bottom has to be 5 mm from the bottom of the plate is the place where the plate has to be dipped into the mobile phase, and that is why distance to solvent is very important. That study has also been done, and that is why you specifically in the CAMAC chambers which are there, the specific volumes of mobile phase are instructed. 10 ml? Why only 10 ml? Why can't we take 12 ml? Or why can't we take 8 ml? That is because to attain that height of mobile phase of 5 mm from the bottom of the surface, so that the spot does not dip. At the same time, you have optimum quantity of mobile phase into the chamber to get the separation done. Followed by that, the developing distance is important. 8 mm is the normally recommended one, but you get a good separation even with 7 mm. But idealistically, the USP parameter talks about 8 mm separation, 8 centimeter, I'm sorry, from the bottom of the plate, and this gives you good resolution without compromising on the diffusion aspect. Then you have the chamber configuration, the saturation and unsaturated and saturated, as well as preconditioned. These C phenomena which are practiced, they give you significant changes in the separation quality. And finally, relative humidity, which is also very important because the separation phenomenon is directly uh, uh, observed under this humidity control, and if the humidity changes, the separation phenomenon also changes. When I talk about standardization, this is typically an association methodology which you see, and it is so very well documented right from how the sample has been prepared, how the substances have been standards have been prepared, whether it is a saturated chamber or humidity control has been established. These all things are clearly defined with the plate plate images, and the passing and non-passing samples have been also clearly shown. What is the variation, what is to be expected, these are to be recorded. Multiple comparison of samples. Now this is very important and interesting when you talk about the concept of structure elucidation. Today I get a sample from a particular area and I observe the separation phenomenon. The next day I get another separation phenomenon, and there I get some separation. I'm sorry, another sample I get and I get the separation. But whether these two samples in any way correlate, how do I check this? So we have an interesting tool of comparison viewer. This is not any synthetic, photoshopped image, but this is properly through the software. It does the comparison of the bands, and from that you can identify how the separation quality has happened over the time period at different time points, and that is how you can observe over here. So this is very interesting because when you are scanning through various samples and you want to look at the consistency of the sample separation, then yes, this becomes a very good nice tool for seeing how the separation phenomenon has happened. Then this is about adulteration. We'll not talk about this much and move further. This is a complete system of which you can see, and this is how the data is being generated, chromatograms, images, and if you do the MS investigation, you also get a mass spectra. Now, this is the next generation equipment that is also there in HPTLC, and that is specially targeted from for quality control aspect. We just see a glimpse and not go into detail of this. So let me show you the how it is there. It is focused on automation, complete reproducibility, and high throughput. So these are the two modules of it.
We will probably change to after, not now.
So the last track on the plate has been applied, track number 15.
Yeah.
Now the needle has gone for rinsing. The plate is now finished. You can see the plate is coming out. It is moved to the transport automatically. And now it will be fed into the developing chamber.
It's asking for the second plate.
And the second plate is also going in. So you can see the automation. We are doing two analyses back to back. So the second plate will now start being applied while the first plate is being developed. So there is a fresh plate being applied now, and our older plate being developed in this chamber. So that's the automation.
So here you see how the operation happens and how the separation happens. अरे Sonic heater बंद करना. And sorry, this is the unit which is totally automated and not involving any manual involvement in the separation. Now, when you talk about compliances, these are something electronic data is being generated. So definitely you require the electronic compliances. And when you talk about recording the data, these are some of the aspects which are related to this. The 21 CFR part rule 11 compliance is there. GMP practices, GLP practices, IQOQ, digital signatures, access control, all these are present into the software, which gives you ultimate security of the data which you are being generated. And that is why this is a very interesting part, because only a selective user who has done a particular experiment can access his data and see. Others can only see, but they cannot change any data inside it. So those kind of access controls are given. Audit trials and backup tools are all seen. Then when we move further, this talks about sample preparation. We'll not go into this and directly go into the applicator. These are some of the applicators which we have, the Linomat 5 and ATS4. These two are again this is semi-automated and this one is fully automated. The Linomat 5 is semi-automated, ATS4 is fully automated. And it does the application in the form of spot, band, rectangles, and spray. Now here we have an interesting slide of how the applications can be done, either in quantitative estimation, standard sample, or you can clean up the sample on the plate itself, apply the oil samples over here, and then develop it with the petroleum ether, tilt the plate, cut across, and develop it with another solvent. Do a micro-preparative kind of plate where you apply a single band onto the plate to get the separation of the compounds, and then superimpose where you apply the spot and give some internal compound to be added onto superimpose. This is how a typically micro-preparative plate looks. This is an example of that, and here you see a small band is applied at the side to get a reference, but you apply actually basically a bigger band, separate it, and then if I'm interested to isolate this compound, I can easily do it with HPTLC system. Then we have the development phase where you have gradient elution chamber, twin trough, automatic development chambers that are a part of the system, and these are availability for different kinds of requirement. When you are doing trials and all, twin trough chamber is very good. We can use it for developing of plates. Automatic development chambers with the humidity control is good for once you have developed the method and final stages of validating the method. And you also have a concept of gradient elution in HPTLC. This is a typical normal development which we see. Automatic development with humidity control device is seen over here. And layer equilibrium, all these happens automatically over here. You don't have to do anything. We'll see a small video of how this process happens.
Software. Chromatogram development is the heart of the HPTLC process.
Sorry.
CAMAG is the world leader in planar chromatography. And provides instruments, software, PLC process. In the CAMAG Automatic Development Chamber ADC2, this step is fully automated and reproducible, independent of environmental effects. The activation of the plate, preconditioning, chamber saturation, developing distance, and final drying can be preset and monitored using the VisionCat's HPTLC software. With its guided approach, VisionCats effectively leads you through the entire chromatographic process, step by step. The ADC2 will automatically develop the plate, leaving the analyst free to do other work. The ADC2 provides development under controlled conditions. Open the front door, load the applied plate in development and 25 milliliters of developing solvent for chamber saturation into the solvent ports. The entire process is monitored. The plate is developed in a saturated chamber if using the default settings. The automatic developing chamber ADC2 and the optional humidity control create standardized conditions, obtaining reproducible results from plate to plate. Perform chromatography under different climatic conditions and compare chromatograms created in different labs of results obtained from different batches. Chromatography is started by lowering the plate into the developing solvent. During chromatography, the position of the solvent front is monitored. At the end, the developed plate is homogeneously dried in an airstream. All parameters are recorded in compliance with CGMP, CGLP as part of the analysis. After successful chromatogram development, just open the front door of the ADC2 and remove the developed plate for the next step of the HPTLC process.
Chalo, sir.
Yeah. Before I proceed, how much time do I have for this session? Sorry, there's some
Sir,
disturbances.
20 minutes more are
Okay, that's good. Okay, so this is, you saw how the development has happened. Now, when we have the concept of gradient development also, where you can see separation of compounds which happen with different mobile phases, combinations of different polarity, and then you are able to separate components which are selective at different, like here you have the most common polar mobile phase, like in methanol you can develop. Then you go to the medium polar by combining methanol with n-hexane, and then you totally combine it with 100% n-hexane to, so components get separated according to the polarity, and you can identify components which are of different classes, like saponins, which are a little bit of water soluble, but you also have oils in that, so you also want to analyze them. So then you can use such kind of a gradient type approach known as with the multiple development at different combinations of mobile phase. So this is an example of such gradient elution. Will not go into the deep. Then you have the imaging process, which is very important. I told you documentation has to be done after the imaging, after the separation has happened. And here you have the 254, 366 and white light images that have been taken. So with the visualizer, then the scanning step. This is how the animation of how the scanning step happens. I'll just go a slide back 1 minute. Yeah. Oh, this animation is not playing. Anyways, this is an example of when the lamp light is incidented onto the plate, and as the plate is moving, the reflected light is being captured by the photomultiplier tube, and that is how you record the response from the plate with the help of the photomultiplier tube. So you have some features like the range, the lamps. You will get 3 lamps into this, which gives it a range of 190 to 900. Now, the advantage of going into selective wavelength is that you minimize the noise and you only focus on compound. Like example is caffeine. Caffeine has a absorption maxima at 276 nanometers. So if I use that particular wavelength, I will suppress the background signal and I will only focus on that particular a band of caffeine onto the plate. So that is, I can use this in this way. Then I can scan and get the spectra of caffeine and compare it with my sample to get a better understanding. So this is some of the advantages here. You see an example of that, how different components have different spectrum patterns and how you can overlay them to find out the identity and purity of this. So then we can also scan at lower wavelengths, very low wavelengths like 200, 210, and 190 nanometers, because we don't get an interference from any solvent components or something like that. So that gives us advantage that you can go very low, which are low UV compounds and not being detected normally. That those also you can scan and get an understanding. So again, this is very important because some components you may not be able to see visibly, and they may not be possible to do in other kinds of chromatographic technique. But here you can scan really go low and find out the presence. Like here, you example shown is tetrahydrocannabinoids, and that is not visible at normal wavelength. So what they have done is they have scanned at 210 and we have got the signal, and that is very prominent without any background interference. So that is very important when you are focusing and trying to understand what has happened. There may be certain hidden compounds, and that you can explore by such low wavelength scans and investigate. So this is another important aspect when we correlate this to drug discovery and structure elucidation. This can be a really understanding methodology. Then derivatization, you have different types of derivatization that are based on the technique you're using. One of the two popular techniques are dipping and spraying. Here you have the first device which is used for dipping, where you actually dip the compound into the immersion device and you get the understanding. And there is the other part which is spray. Now let's go through and understand how this spray phenomenon works. So I will just show you in brief. So this is a chamber
properties of the different
where you load the hood into the instrument, that is the derivatizer. Now you load the nozzle in which you are going to load your
recommended
reagent.
settings and recipes are provided. After positioning the plate, the hood is lowered and completely sealed to prevent spraying reagent from leaking to the outside. Fill the recommended volume of reagent into the nozzle. The spraying process
This is the reagent which is being added.
The spraying level and activating the start button. The nozzle generates an extremely fine reagent.
So you get a very fine mist of the reagent. And now this is very important because you completely coat the plate with the derivatizing reagent so that the reaction is uniform. The excess amount of fumes are being collected at the back, and this is how very smoothly and efficiently the derivatizing reagent is being covering up the surface. And one of the important aspect you see over here, that after derivatization also there is no diffusion which is happening. Normally if you do this spraying by hand, the droplets form of different sizes and they tend to spill over. So when you are trying to investigate any compound, it is very essential for you to spray it uniformly. So this is how we do it with the help of a sprayer. So it is very uniform and the spots can be seen without any diffusion. So derivatization is an important part of this chromatography, and you can use it very tactfully for different kinds of analysis. Now we move on to another important equipment, which is the TLC MS interface, and see the use of how it can be typically used to characterize. So this is the piston. So one way you have a normal HPLC pump, and the other part you connect it to the MS interface. Typically the setup is something like this. You have the pump, then you have the interface, and followed by that the TLC MS the MS detector with different ionization techniques. And now what happens is the solvent which comes, the piston is lowered onto the spot. The solvent is coming from the pump and it is eluting the compound and going into the mass detector and giving you the mass output. Or else you can collect it in a vial and do further investigations in IR, NMR, or even LCMS. You wish, you can analyze that molecule. So very easy, direct, cost effective. Any kind of solvents you can use. Fingerprint, it can be used for many different dimensions of analysis, and some of the examples have been shown, like investigation in an Ayurvedic sample of synthetic compounds of tadalafil. Then there are some posters where again molecules have been investigated and their structure has been studied. This is quinones from Tectona grandis. So very powerful tool, and these are some of the very popular papers that have been published. And as I was talking about the bioautography part, this is up with Alivibrio fishery, which is used for toxicity screening. Similarly, you can use an microbial culture, an enzymatic culture, depending on what you wish to investigate and see its activity on those. So very interesting subject. And here what you do is coat the plate with this bacterial solution. In this case, the toxicity, that is the bacteria has bioluminescence, and when you dip the plate inside that, when the bacteria dies, the bioluminescence is lost. So it indicates that the molecule is toxic. Like that, if you can have the antimicrobial study, you can use it. DPPH, you can use it. So this is an important aspect. Apple juices, formulation stability, studies, packaging contaminations, these all things can be easily studied, and novel molecules can be also found out, because you know, even at higher doses an alkaloid may be lethal, but those at very low doses are potent medicines. So this is the first step of establishing any potent molecule, and here is an example of that. The same plate, you can derivatize with different reagents and get a lot more output. And this example exactly shows you that same plate has been derivatized first under UV 366, you observe, then you derivatize with the reagent and observed under visible 366. That same plate, you dip it in DPPH reagent, you get an antioxidant understanding. Anti-Alzheimer activity is shown over here with the ACHE investigation. And finally, whether it is anti-diabetic in nature, beta glucosidase and alpha glucosidase enzymes have been used to detect that finally. So lot more advantages, simple, and there are many assays: antifungal, bacterial, oxidant, enzymatic, as I told you. Very simplistic in establishment. You can either spray the reagent or dip in the reagent. And some established methods for screening of antibiotics, genotoxicity, diabetes, Alzheimer's, melanin production, herbicides, all they have already been established and can be easily incorporated. So these are again some of the examples of antimicrobial. Now these are different applications where identification have been done. Then triterpenoids. So novel molecules from plants, animal, botanical origins is very easy to investigate, and with the help of HPTLC, the screening part is very simple. These are some of the examples of that. Quality control is another aspect. So you can also quality control, that is, as I told you, you monitor multiple samples to see whether that same compound is repeating and giving you, when you have isolated and trying to establish its structural conformity and activity, you can do that. And the derivatization part also really helps you to understand the molecule's nature. So again, these are some of the examples. Caffeine content, will quickly go through this. And quantitative estimation, you can also do of those markers which have been isolated. There's a huge list, will not go into that. And effect directed analysis. So validation study, formulation studies, all is possible. And compounds can be investigated. These are again some of the practical aspects associated. And then formulation, similarly in pharma also you have different applications. So with this, we'll just go into the another aspect of data interpretation in HPTLC, because it is very important. So you see unknown impurities, cleaning validation of your batches, finished product analysis, and you have some scholarships which are available from HPTLC symposium, which happens internationally. If you publish and working on such kind of a investigation with the help of HPTLC, you can represent your paper at these symposiums. And from last 2 years, Indian scientists have established themselves, and we also help students from Indian origin and people from researchers from Indian scientists from Indian origin to publish their paper internationally. So this is there, and a lot of literature which is associated with HPTLC. You can find out where you can get a lot of understanding. So with this, I will just stop this presentation, and another 5 minutes I should be finishing off with my presentation. Then I was talking about data analysis. These are some of the important aspects when you're going for isolation and characterization, quantitation, isolation. So what is your aim? Depending on that, everything depends. The process of how much content it is, you have to accordingly concentrate or dilute the sample, or apply larger quantity, dilute the sample, then take the help of literature to find out some references which are either directly or indirectly correlated. Then if standards are available to establish correlation, or similar kind of standards are available, you can use those. And here because it is visible, you can use either a 65% quality standard, which is known as typically working standards, are also easily available, cheaper in cost aspect, and that is why you have a lot more advantages everywhere. Then same thing, comparison of tracks, related information. This is how you assemble the data and try to interpret what is coming out of the picture. And then you can intensify. There are some features which also help them do some preliminary quantification, understand the data, and get your quantification results. So this was again a type of difficult data interpretation when you are using HPTLC and analyzing different samples. And finally, we'll just quickly see one video and of a complete analysis, and then sum up the session for question answers. So this is about steviol glycoside. Of course, an investigation. So we start with sample preparation, preparation of analysis, and this list of steps have been shown. You weigh the sample, and then you start with adding the solvent. Sorry, I think my sharing has stopped. No, okay. Yeah. Then transfer the sample, sonicated, and using same devices. After that, you prepare the software with all the methodologies. How you fill in the details to the applicator, and now sample application happens in the form of band. So with the help of one click, you go on with the application, and the applicator starts applying the sample onto the plate. After that, you perform the development. So you have the ADC ready with your mobile face required, and then you have this again software to command it. You load the plate, and the development happens through the ADC2. After development, the derivatization of the plate happens. Prepare the reagent, and this is how the development process happens. The plate is being dipped, and it is taken out by the instrument itself. Now you remove the plate, place it on the plate heater, and then finally, as the reaction completes, you will be able to see visible compounds after the derivatization. So you capture the images with the visualizer and get the images. This is the visualizer, and you load the plate over here and start capturing it with the software. How you see the capturing happens of the images. And then we scan the plate. After derivatization, we load the plates into the scanner, place it, secure it with the help of magnets, and then we a door and give the command to the software where the scanning happens. So it starts acquiring the data and you get chromatograms like this, which you start integrating. So here you have 4 components: riboside, stereoside, riboside A, riboside and D. And these all simultaneously have been separated and their calibration is also plotted and you get the response. And finally, it does not end over here. This is the report to the software, how it is generated. You can do the TLC MS extraction. You see the plate, it is being loaded into the TLC MS interface at a particular place, and you load the head. And then the elution happens with the help of the TLC MS interface, and we get the mass data from the. This is how it is seen after the elution has been happened from the TLC MS interface, and this is how you get the mass data. So this is how a typical experiment of HPTLC is done with using all the software and hardware. So with this note, I end my presentation and a video. I'm sorry about the in between disturbances which happened. So now we are open for questions.
Yes, dear colleagues and participants, if you have any question, please raise your hand or you can simply put in a chat box. Dr. Saikat, you can have a look at the chat and the messages if there are any questions.
So
Please, participants.
yeah, unfortunately, as I had got disconnected in between, I can't see the chats over here. It's showing me
Still,
blank.
there are no any questions.
Yeah, so if or you can mail this to us and we'll reply them through a mail. And if anybody wants to live answer any question, I shall be happy to do that.
They can unmute themselves and also ask the question, no problem.
Okay, I think there are no questions from the participant slide.
Okay.
On behalf of Government College of Pharmacy and the organizing team, I am very much thankful to Dr. Saikat for delivering a beautiful insights on the HPTLC and its application. You thoroughly gone through the basic principles of the HPTLC and then put the participants and enlighten them how the applications are done and also the elucidation with the help of the mass spectra. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We
Thank
look
you, sir.
forward for the same commencement and the same help from you in the future also. Now I request to the principal, Dr. Burade sir, Government College of Pharmacy, Karad, to present a certificate as a token of appreciation in the digital form. Please
Thank you.
accept it, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Copy of the certificate definitely will be mailed to you soon.
Sure, sir. Thank you, sir.
To the organizing team. Okay, there are some feedbacks in the chat.
Okay.
Thank you, dear participants.
Thank
now
you, sir.
it's lunch break and some of the instructions will be given by coordinator of the program, Charde sir. Thank you, Dr.
Yeah.
Saikat.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
Thank you to
Saikat
all
sir,
the
thank you very
participants. Thank you,
very
sir.
much.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Nice presentation from your side.
Thank you, sir. Hope it has benefited. I tried to club in many things so that they can utilize all the different ideas that are there with us for their different applications. Unfortunately, there were some disturbances.
Time was the barrier, no?
Yeah.
Probably you need some more
Yes.
time to share the things.
Yes,
Anyway,
definitely.
It was
Yeah.
really wonderful.
Thank you.
Actually, your session was live on YouTube also. So I
Okay.
have shared the links with so many people.
Okay.
And they are enjoyed your lecture also.
Thank
So,
you. Thank you, sir.
participants, we will meet at 2:30 for the next session. Please join before 5 minutes so that we will start our session at a time. Because a lot of speakers told me that this 1.5 hours is not possible for them to have the total insight. But anyway, with the constraint of the time, we have to manage all the things. So thank you very much. See you after lunch. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. And I wish your permission to exit from this session, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Take care. Thank you all.